The Cherry Blossom Open, a major fencing tournament held in Maryland, became the epicenter of a national debate in early April 2025. Stephanie Turner, a female fencer, refused to compete against Redmond Sullivan, a transgender woman. Turner's protest, taking a knee during their scheduled match, resulted in her disqualification. Her actions brought to light the simmering controversy surrounding USA Fencing's transgender inclusion policy. Turner's protest was not about Sullivan personally, rather, it was a direct challenge to the policy that allowed Sullivan to compete in the women's division. This incident forced a national conversation about the complex issues of gender identity, athletic fairness, and the rights of transgender individuals in sports. The Cherry Blossom Open became a flashpoint, but the roots of this controversy run much deeper, touching upon societal anxieties, political maneuvering, and the very definition of fairness in competition. The coming weeks and months would determine whether this incident would serve as a catalyst for understanding or further division. Stephanie Turner, in her own words, was standing up for what she believed in. "I am a woman, and this is a man," she stated after her disqualification, "and this is a women's tournament." Her protest, she maintained, was not about hate, but about protecting the integrity of women's sports. Turner argued that transgender women, having gone through male puberty, have an unfair advantage over cisgender women. This advantage, she argued, undermines fair play and threatens the future of women's athletics. Turner's stance resonated with a growing number of athletes and voices across the country who shared her concerns. Turner's actions, however, came with a cost. She faced immediate disqualification and the potential for further sanctions from USA Fencing. More significantly, she risked being ostracized by a sport she loved. Despite the backlash, Turner remained steadfast in her convictions, becoming a symbol for those opposed to transgender inclusion in women's sports. Her protest, regardless of one's stance on the issue, highlighted the deep divisions and the very real human consequences of this ongoing debate. USA Fencing found itself at the heart of a storm. The organization's transgender inclusion policy, enacted in 2023, allows athletes to compete based on their gender identity. This policy, they argued, was rooted in principles of inclusivity and aimed to create a safe and welcoming environment for all athletes regardless of gender identity. USA Fencing defended its policy, citing current research and medical consensus on transgender athletes. They emphasized their commitment to fostering a sport that is open and accessible to everyone. Their position aligned with the International Olympic Committee's guidelines on transgender participation, which prioritize inclusion and individual rights. However, the organization faced a wave of backlash following Turner's protest. Critics argued that the policy, while well-intentioned, failed to consider the potential for unfair competitive advantages. They questioned the scientific basis for the policy and accused USA Fencing of prioritizing ideology over fair play. USA Fencing maintained that their policy was open to review and potential amendments based on evolving scientific understanding or changes in IOC guidelines. However, they remained resolute in their commitment to inclusivity, setting the stage for a protracted battle over the future of transgender athletes in the sport. The controversy surrounding USA Fencing's transgender inclusion policy quickly escalated beyond the world of sports, attracting the attention of politicians and lawmakers. On April 8, 2025, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton announced an investigation into USA Fencing for potential violations of Texas consumer protection laws. Paxton, a vocal critic of transgender rights, argued that USA Fencing's policy was misleading to athletes and the public. He contended that the policy, by allowing transgender women to compete against cisgender women, created a false impression of a level playing field. Paxton's investigation aimed to determine whether USA Fencing's policy constituted deceptive practices under Texas law. This investigation, though focused on USA Fencing, represented a broader push by conservative lawmakers across the country to challenge transgender inclusion in sports. Paxton's actions signaled a willingness to use legal means to enforce a particular view of gender and fairness in athletics, potentially setting a precedent for similar actions in other states. The investigation, regardless of its outcome, added another layer of complexity to the debate, injecting legal ramifications into an already heated controversy. The political pressure on USA fencing intensified when Senator Ted Cruz, chairman of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation, issued a letter demanding the organization retract its transgender inclusion policy. Cruz, a staunch conservative and ally of former President Trump, argued that the policy violated the spirit of fair competition and threatened the integrity of women's sports. Cruz's letter cited President Trump's executive order banning transgender athletes from women's sports as justification for his stance. He warned USA Fencing that their continued defiance of this order could jeopardize their status as a national governing body, potentially resulting in a loss of federal funding and recognition. Cruz's ultimatum placed USA Fencing in a precarious position. The organization faced a difficult choice: comply with political pressure and potentially alienate a portion of their athletes, or stand by their policy and risk losing vital funding and recognition. This high-stakes standoff underscored the politicization of transgender rights and the increasing pressure on sporting bodies to navigate this complex and divisive issue. Looming over the controversy was former President Donald Trump's executive order banning transgender women from competing in women's sports. Signed in February 2025, the order was a victory for conservative groups advocating for the ban. It threatened to withhold federal funding from non-compliant schools and organizations. The University of Pennsylvania faced a $175 million funding freeze for supporting transgender athletes. This highlighted the consequences for defying the Trump administration's stance. Trump's order continued to influence the national conversation on transgender rights in sports. It emboldened conservative lawmakers and activists, shaping the political landscape. The order's long-term impact on transgender athletes remained uncertain but significant. Facing mounting pressure from politicians, threats of legal action, and the specter of lost funding, USA Fencing found itself at a crossroads. However, the organization, while acknowledging the complexities of the situation, refused to buckle under pressure. They chose to stand by their commitment to inclusivity, walking a tightrope between defending their policy and seeking to appease their detractors. In response to Senator Cruz's letter, USA Fencing declined to comment directly but reiterated their dedication to creating a welcoming and inclusive environment for all athletes. They emphasized their willingness to engage in constructive dialogue with stakeholders, including policymakers, athletes, and medical experts. However, they remained steadfast in their refusal to compromise the core principles of their policy. Their response, while measured, signaled a determination to chart their own course, balancing the demands of inclusivity with the realities of the political landscape. Whether this delicate balancing act would prove sustainable in the long run remained to be seen. However, in that moment, USA Fencing chose to prioritize the well-being and inclusion of all their athletes, drawing a line in the sand and refusing to be swayed by political pressure. The controversy surrounding USA Fencing's transgender inclusion policy mirrors a larger national debate. Transgender rights in sports have become a flashpoint, exposing deep divisions about fairness and inclusion. Some argue transgender women should compete according to their gender identity, emphasizing inclusivity. They highlight the mental and emotional well-being of transgender youth. Others argue transgender women have an unfair advantage due to physiological factors. They frame their arguments as protecting women's sports. The debate, often heated, plays out in media, legislatures, and courtrooms. It highlights the complexities of gender identity and the need for respectful dialogue. The controversy surrounding USA Fencing's transgender inclusion policy, while deeply divisive, offered an opportunity for reflection and growth. It forced a national conversation about the rights of transgender individuals, the meaning of fairness in sports, and the challenges of building a more inclusive society. Finding common ground in this debate required empathy, understanding, and a willingness to engage in respectful dialogue. Moving forward, it was essential to prioritize the well-being and dignity of transgender athletes. Policies and regulations should be grounded in scientific evidence, medical consensus, and a commitment to creating a level playing field while ensuring that transgender athletes are not unfairly excluded. The path forward would not be easy. However, by embracing the principles of inclusivity, fairness, and respect, it was possible to create a sporting landscape where all athletes, regardless of gender identity, could thrive and compete to the best of their abilities. The USA fencing controversy, while painful and divisive, had the potential to serve as a catalyst for positive change, reminding us that the pursuit of athletic excellence should be a source of unity, not division.